Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to What's Cooking with Dr. Cook. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Koch, the resident registered dietitian and editor with foodguides.com, which is a place for acid reflux, GERD, and IBS sufferers to get expert-driven nutrition information, product recommendations, and recipes, all specific to their condition in one location. And today we are going to talk about protein facts and fiction. And I would love to introduce our very special guest, Lenoir Rhyne University's professor of exercise science, and somebody who I adore very much, Dr. Alex Cook. So hello.
Pleasure to be here, darling. Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Well, happy
So,
to.
could you just start by giving our audience like a little background about you? Because I know the last time that you were on, we didn't really do that. So, I would love for you just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am the luckiest man in the world because I'm married to you. And in addition to that, I am a professor, as you said, of exercise science at Lenoir Rhyne University. I've been there. Lenoir Rhyne is a small liberal arts college in Hickory, North Carolina, where we're based, and I've been there for 10 years. Prior to that, I worked at Truman State University as a professor in exercise science from the year 2000 to 2011. And in addition to being an academic, I also, as a side gig, I coach weightlifting. I'm a national coach with USA Weightlifting. I teach coaching courses. I've coached many athletes to the national championships, the university nationals, American Open. Have a two-time world team member, 2007, 2011, Mr. Zach Schlunder, who's a great guy and a good friend of mine. And, avid weightlifting, weight training enthusiast, really been, doing work with the barbell since I was 15 years old. Competed in weightlifting myself, very unsuccessfully, but enthusiastically, from 1996 to 2019, when I had the devastating quadricep tendon tear, which ended my competitive career, as you well know. But I still, work out to stay fit, of course. And in that milieu, I've been exposed a lot, of course, to what we're going to be talking about, and kind of goes in with my professional career as well. But talking a lot about protein, because a lot of times strength athletes and just fitness enthusiasts have some a lot of questions, a lot of misconceptions about the use of protein, the need for protein in daily life.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, I might have heard that you are the most published professor at Lenoir Rhyne University. Is that true?
According to ResearchGate, which is like Facebook for people who publish research, I am the most cited. So I don't know if that means I've published the most, but citations where other people cite your work, I keep getting weekly notices from them that I'm the most cited researcher from my little university, which is, I guess, a cute little feather in my. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. So you're qualified to be here.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I'll take it anyway. So.
Well, that's great. Well, one of the reasons why is that protein is such a hot topic. And I just want to clear the air with all of our listeners right now is that we're not hating on protein by any means. We just want to clarify some of the misconceptions out there about protein. Um, and a lot of that comes with some of the misconceptions that are out there, in fact, in the fitness world. I work with GERD, acid reflux, IBS sufferers, and those following the low FODMAP lifestyle. And many times with those conditions, GI side effects are 100% there. So, protein intake and GI side effects kind of go hand in hand. And that's something that you have seen in the field as well.
Absolutely, and I think I guess the major culprit, I think, and perhaps you'd agree, in my experience at least, is overconsumption. Because how much protein does one need, and I guess I always fall back, and in addition to my other backgrounds, I'm a science fiction geek, as you well know. So I always think back to the classic 1990s television series Babylon 5. Uh, which, in that there's a theme where there's two sort of ancient alien races, and one of them sort of leads people by saying, who are you? Asking sort of philosophically who you are. And then the other one leads them sort of with temptation. It was like, what do you want? And that applies to a lot of things in life, including exercise, including diet. Who are you? What do you want? Most people, just trying to live healthy lives, they're getting plenty of protein probably already. I've read that the average American protein intake Babylon 5 classic show. But if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And I hear they're remaking it too. So I'm excited for that. We'll have to watch it together, darling. Average American consumes 1.4 grams of protein per kilo of body mass. Is based on most epidemiological studies looking at average protein intake, 1.4 grams per kilo per day, which is a lot, and more than most people need, because most people don't even exercise, and the average intake for what people who don't exercise needs is 0.8. But a lot of folks who I speak to, when they speak about trying to improve their health and trying to eat better, they most commonly cite, and I think this is due to sadly, in America, we have the stubborn, retention of the imperial measurement system, where other than like liters of soda, we don't really talk in anything metric. So the grams to kilo doesn't really translate. What most people do is I'll do a gram per pound, which
Yes.
a huge overconsumption
Right.
of protein. So that's 2.2 grams per kilo of protein per day, which is way more than you need. Way more than you need. It's not really going to hurt you other than your wallet. You're going to be spending a lot more on protein, probably using protein supplements, and not really seeing any additional benefit from it. So who are you? What do you want? If you're trying to build muscle, the evidence is pretty clear. It's about 1.6 grams per day of proteins. That's sort of where you need to top out at. And then any additional protein on top of that is really not doing you any benefit.
Well, yeah, and I would love to discuss, like, you know, the maximum amount of protein for muscle protein synthesis with you here shortly. But, kind of going back to that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, like, where do you think that thought process even originated from?
I think it's just a way to try to make it a little easier for people who are not, who are, I often use the term metrically challenged. They want to save a step, essentially doing, what do I weigh in pounds versus kilos, and, make it a little easier. That's my suspicion. I don't really know, but I certainly see it a lot, in addition to, some of my my professional work. I do a little like consulting work, and like I've written for Men's Health and Muscular Development and stuff like that. These are the the popular magazines, and that's littered throughout them and has been for decades. So it's a very common refrain, and I don't know where it originated, but I suspect it is just because in America, we like pounds. That's what we're used to. So the back of the food wrapper says grams. Then how do you make it into a conversion that can speak to that person?
Right. And so for everybody listening, most of the recommendations come in, you know, grams per kilogram body weight. And to figure your body weight in kilograms, you take your body weight in pounds and divide that by 2.2, and then you will get your body weight in kilograms. So if you haven't done that before, that's how you configure it. It's your pounds divided by 2.2, and that's how you get your body weight in kilograms. And it makes a big difference when you're actually looking at these, calculations to figure out what your protein needs are, to know what your weight in kilograms is.
Yeah, it
So,
certainly does. I really wish we would adopt metric all the way, because I think it's a nicer system. I mean, like if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 91 kilos. That sounds just it sounds cooler. As a weightlifter, um, everything we competed in was kilos. So I always felt it mentally made it easier to lift a weight when the number was smaller. I'm just lifting another 5 kilos. Even though it's the same thing as another 11 pounds, it didn't sound as intimidating. So it made it a little easier to wrap your mind around. So I think it's like a win-win.
Definitely. So protein is an essential macronutrient. So we absolutely have to have it. Um, and I think that a lot of people just think like, oh, I have to get that macro in to build muscle. But really, protein does so much more than that. I mean, it helps with healing, especially wound healing. It helps with your skin and your hair and your nails. I mean, it's really essential for growth and maintenance in children and adults. Um, Bone health, very important. So when we get down to it, there's always that fundamental question, is there a limit to how much you can eat per day? And that's a tricky one because at the end of the day, no. I mean, there's not a limit to how much you can eat. You can eat protein all day, but it's really how much of that protein are you eating is actually being utilized. So we have looked at the research, and what we're seeing is that for optimal protein muscle synthesis, there is a threshold. So that is the zero 0.4 grams per kilogram body weight over the span of 4 meals a day. And that's, the study that, I was showing you.
Right, exactly.
And,
To make clear,
that's about 20 to 35 grams per meal.
exactly. So that's what you're speaking is the how much can you absorb at one time. Because again, a lot of people I've had friends, acquaintances that they were bragging essentially that, yeah, man, I just had 100 grams of protein in this meal, and
Same.
I'm thinking, oh man, you're going to wreck a toilet in a couple of hours, and that's largely not doing you much good. So yeah, the absorbable quantity that you can actually put to good use is topping out at about you said zero 0.4 grams per kilo of your body mass in one meal, and then it's going to be like probably like a 4 hour, 6 hour window before you can absorb another bolus that size again.
Yeah, and it really depends on the type of protein too, the bioavailability. So, how is that protein being utilized? So, whey protein, for example, you know, 10 grams of whey protein that can be utilized in your body within an hour. 3 grams of protein from an egg per hour. So different types of protein are going to be utilized at different times too. I mean, it's all dependent on the type and the quantity as well. But that's where the whole idea of like protein supplements come in. Like, do people actually need to supplement their protein because there are so many high protein foods, you know, not just meat, but also plant based that provide those higher level protein. Like, for example, cottage cheese is insane, 18 grams of protein in a half a cup.
Yeah, and that's basically a protein shake. Exactly. So, and yet that's an excellent point. I mean, do you need to do special foods to get your protein? No, you don't. I mean, you guess you could make the argument that there's an advantage for convenience. It's easier to take a shaker cup, that sort of stuff. They have pre-prepared protein shakes, which again, and if you enjoy it and it's not hurting your budget, it's not hurting you. There's nothing wrong with it. Go for it. But is it absolutely necessary? No.
Right, right. So when you're coaching, do you get a lot of nutrition questions about protein?
I do. I'd say that's probably the second most common. The most common is pre-workouts. I get crazy questions from everybody about those. But yeah, I think I might have made this joke to you before. But you have the PhD in nutrition, of course. I have a PhD in exercise science. So you're the expert there. I'm a, I guess, aspiring amateur or whatever. But The best piece of nutrition advice I gave, I know for sure, it was a fellow who asked me when he should have his protein shake. Should he drink it before he worked out or after he worked out? And I looked at him and I said, well, you need to quit smoking. He was a smoker, and the question he was asking was really sort of irrelevant to that's like if your house is on fire, ants in the kitchen is not your worry. Ants in the kitchen is a problem, but if your house is on fire, you have other things to worry about. And if you're smoking, it doesn't matter when you're drinking your protein shake, if it's before your workout or after your workout. So yeah, and for anybody else, if you're not a smoker, basically it really doesn't matter all that much because you have a huge window after you work out to absorb protein and essentially stimulate protein synthesis through extra protein. So it's not really that critical, like timing of nutrients, which is a whole other question based on what I've read.
Well, and really, like the point with that is to combine a carb and a protein. So, really, one of the best um, protein shakes after working out is chocolate milk.
Absolutely, and there's tons of research on chocolate milk. It's cheap, it's tasty. If you can tolerate lactose, it's a win-win. You really can't get much better than that, and that's really kind
Right.
of a deal. I will say, since we're talking about protein shakes, and with the food guides, population is mostly individuals who have issues with digestion. A lot of times, sadly, the carbohydrate, which is the more essential thing, they cut out of protein shakes because they're marketing to people who have this belief that carbs are bad. Essentially, I'd say it's kind of a popular theme in the fitness world that protein equals good, carbs equals bad. The lower your carbs and the higher your protein, the better. And that's really, not based in evidence. And then I guess to me personally, like the worst aspect of that is that protein supplements and protein drinks, a lot of times they make them like super low carbohydrate, and to make them palatable, they put artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols usually in them, and those are very often triggers for IBS. They're very
Mm-hmm.
high in their FODMAPs, with pretty devastating results, and that's where the whole the problem. I think a lot of the problem of what we call protein farts in the business, that comes from not really the protein so much as the sugar alcohols that they use to make the protein supplement tastier.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The weightlifting meets you've taken me to, the bathrooms have been horrendous.
Yeah, some of those are quite crowded too, and they do the porta potty in the parking lot, and that's it gets it's just yeah, it's not a good situation.
Although I have competed,
Yes, you
I
did.
have competed. So,
Oh.
yeah, I did. I medaled. But
Very good.
yeah, some of the side effects with having, a high protein diet and, low carbohydrate intake, not only if you're choosing some of those supplements that have those sugar alcohols, um, with IBS, we're also looking at the potential of, lactose. If you're looking at some of those supplements that, are containing, whey, even, that can be a trigger for some of the community as well. And, really decrease fiber intake.
Yes.
That's another issue that can really lead to constipation. We're looking at dehydration potentially. Um, so there's a lot of issues in general with just a high protein diet and low carb diet as well. So
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in general, it's not in my from what I understand, it's not directly like devastating for your health. It's not harmful. It's not bad for you. It can just make things a little more unpleasant for you. And the main thing I see as a drawback is that it's not necessary. There's no upside to it. There's no benefit to it. I've seen quite a few studies where when they looked at the protein to carbohydrate ratio in the diet, once you met basic protein needs, if you had a lower protein to carbohydrate ratio, essentially it was associated with higher gains in muscle mass and higher gains in strength. So if you're trying to build muscle mass and build strength, which a lot of folks in the fitness community are, that's, some pretty decent evidence that the carbs are doing an important job. And your carbohydrate restores glycogen in your muscles. That's kind of one of your best energy sources. And if you're doing more than really, like, 3 repetitions per set, you're going to start using some glycogen, and carbohydrates are going to help you perform better, improve your power output. So.
Right. So I was looking at some nutrition recommendations for athletes and protein recommendations. So for endurance athletes, it's recommended that they have 1.2 grams to 1.4 grams per kilogram body weight. Okay. Just to put this in perspective for the audience. So if you are a 180-pound individual, that's 81 kilograms. So your protein needs are between 97 to 113 grams per day. So if you are doing what the recommendations are saying and kind of splitting that up between 4 meals, that's 24 to 28 grams of protein per meal. And that's not crazy. I mean, that's not 181 grams of protein, So then if you go to the higher end of things and you look at the strength to gain muscle mass, the recommendations are 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So this comes out to 130 grams to 162 grams of protein per day. And then spacing that out, that comes out to 32.5 grams of protein to 40.5 grams of protein over 4 meals. So then you're kind of at that higher end, but that's the highest protein recommendation. So 4 meals, you might want to, switch that up to 5 meals to make sure that you're actually absorbing all that protein. But again, not even hitting that 1 gram of protein per kilogram or per pound body weight recommendation.
Exactly. And, just folks, I've a female bodybuilder who weighed about 140 pounds. I knew, like, she was consuming like 400 grams of protein per day, which was sadly, it's kind of atypical for her population. And, she had this belief that it was really necessary to do what she does. And, there's no evidence that backs that up. And there's so many counter examples of very successful strength athletes, bodybuilders who, don't follow anything near that extreme a diet. So.
Right, right. In fact, you know of quite a few very successful vegan
Exactly. Yeah.
athletes.
I guess with that, protein, there are really great plant sources for protein, but I think common conception for most folks is that protein equals meat, and more
Right,
protein, more meat, steak and eggs, tuna fish, chicken breasts. That's essentially what you have to do to get your protein needs, and really, it's not true at all. And you could look at examples. I guess the most prominent one I can name in modern athletics ish. He was the most successful American man in weightlifting in the last 10 years, basically 2008 to, basically 2020. He competed in 3 Olympics. Kendrick Ferris is his name. He switched to a vegan diet really in the midst of his career, and he did actually some of his best lifting. He medaled at the World University Games with a 211 kilo clean and jerk, weighing 85 kilos, which is really, that's still the American record. And Kendrick, in addition to being very strong, he's built like an action figure. I mean, he could have walked off a weightlifting stage and competed in bodybuilding very easily. And, the weightlifting is sometimes a little deceptive. You have guys who don't look like they should be that strong, who are very strong, but Kendrick looked the part. He had the muscles and he had the strength, and he had consumed a vegan diet. And he's not alone. You can look back in history. There's many examples in bodybuilding. He's not a vegan. He's a vegetarian, but Bill Pearl is still around. He was a competitive bodybuilder. He predated Arnold Schwarzenegger a little bit. So like he basically was done, I think, by 1970s, really as a competitor, mostly in the 60s. But he's still alive, still stays in very good shape. But he's been a vegetarian. Essentially, he was a vegetarian while he was winning Mr. Universe, however many times. Easily built big muscles. Um, there's another Mr. America back from the 50s, Ray Hilligan or Hilligan. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but he was an amazing athlete because back in those days they had to do bodybuilding and they also had to do an athletic maneuver. So he was like, for a long time, he was like the lightest American to have clean and jerked over 400 pounds. I think he weighed about 170 pounds when he clean and jerked 400. And this was back in the 1950s, which is really impressive. And he was a vegan, which actually in those days, that's even more rare. There's probably some other examples I can't come up with off the top of my head, but there's a plethora of evidence that you don't have to consume a massive amount of meat to build muscle, to be strong. You have to meet your protein requirements, but as we're talking about, that's probably a lot less than people think. You need a certain amount of protein, but beyond that, it's just essentially a waste of effort.
Yeah, definitely. Generally, so what the recommendations are for, adults over the age of 18 is between 5 to 6 ounces of protein, per day.
Hey,
And one of the
measurement.
tools that, huh?
Use an imperial measurement. That's good.
Yeah, right. And, one of the tools that I always use, to teach people the different serving sizes is the hand method. So, you have all the measurements you need on your hand, on the palm of your hand. So the palm of your hand is 3 ounces, roughly. And if you make your hand into a fist, this is a cup. The tip of your thumb is a tablespoon. The tip of your pointer finger is a teaspoon. So it's always kind of helpful. But, if you look at your palm and you see, wow, that's 3 ounces when you're sizing out your meat portions, you know, that could be relatively small looking compared to what you actually get when you go out to eat, you know.
Okay.
So something to think about when you're looking at your portion sizes, and maybe reconsider exactly how much protein you're actually taking in if you are a meat eater, you know. So it's it's kind of just interesting because there's so much out there right now, and I think that's important, to talk about protein, because I think about, like, what's the long-term goal here? One of those being sustainability, um, because the the keto diet's a big thing. One of the hot topics I like to get into, the very high protein, high fat, low carbohydrate diet. Like, how sustainable is that? Um, Agriculture definitely impacts, greenhouse emissions. So that's going to impact our future 100%, because dairy and animal products, they make more greenhouse emissions than plant-based products. So
Yeah, and that's and as you talk about sustainability, essentially, if the 8 billion people on planet Earth all tried to eat keto, we'd essentially destroy the environment and make the planet uninhabitable pretty quickly, sadly. So, for ethical reasons, the plant-based diet is probably the only true path to sustainability. I say that as a meat eater. I enjoy a bit of meat, but um, I think the term is flexitarian is probably the most ethical way you can enjoy meat, which is essentially you're using meat more of a flavoring agent to spice it up your meal experience, rather than going beyond the 3 ounce, 4 ounce servings. I've had in my youth, I think So 16-ounce steak was like the biggest thing. It was like, massive, spilled over the size of the plate, served in a restaurant. And, basically it was like a dare to be able to finish the thing. But, it's very wasteful, sadly, and not necessary. Because at that point, it's just that massive amount of meat. It's not even fun to eat, for me at least.
Exactly. Exactly. And, that brings me to another point is longevity. So we know through research that people who eat meat sparingly, or probably actually within the actual recommendations for animal protein, um, they tend to live longer if they have fruits, vegetables, whole grains, the carbs in their diet.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that brings to mind, with the move in some circles to recommend a carnivore diet or a meat eater's diet, they often cite really flawed evidence. Because one of the main cultural examples they use of a more of a carnivore diet is the Inuit, and there's this common conception that the Inuit essentially had a very low incidence of heart disease. And if you look at the actual evidence, it's not really based on any good evidence, which is actually surprising to me. I remember as a little kid growing up, and I'd see the commercials, and I think there were commercials for fish oil supplements, but they'd have the Inuit guy in a canoe, kayak, I guess. And they were talking about how the Inuit basically have no heart disease, and essentially this is the reason you should, and because of omega-3 oils, and you should take those. And they also attribute the omega-3s that are in fishes, and there are probably some benefits to those, but it was really oversold because if you look at the better studies that were done, and I was reading a very good historical article about the whole origin of the myth that the Inuit had no heart disease, and it was based on two Danish researchers who went to the Arctic, and they talked to folks about the diet, and they just were operating under the assumption that the Inuit had no heart disease. They weren't measuring any public health records, no, looking at causes of death in the population. And the later studies that were done that actually did that found that there was about the same incidence of heart disease in the Inuit as other populations, and actually a higher risk of stroke. So, that's not a huge selling point for a carnivore diet. So yeah, even the evidence that is often cited is not very good.
Right, right. And that kind of brings me to the American Heart Association and the American College of, Cardiology, and their their points, like their take-home messages for the prevention of cardiovascular disease, and how the top like two, like the number one and I think number four, are 100% focused on lifestyle and diet. And the diet specifically states fruit, vegetable, whole grains, you know, red meats sparingly, fish, nuts, increase those, um, to prevent cardiovascular disease. And this is important because of the fact that not only is that the number one, all cause mortality in the United States, but the entire world. So why wouldn't people want to follow the recommendations for longevity? you
Exactly.
know,
And
absolutely.
and a lot of the pleasure of food is I mean, just the hedonistic pleasure. It's tasty, it's fun, and there are so many. I mean, a good steak is nice, but I also enjoy the baked potato and the vegetables that go with it, and I couldn't conceive of only eating the protein and minimizing those other macronutrients in one's life. I feel that like keto diet, and any sort of variant of that, the really super high protein, high fat, carbohydrates are bad thinking. I think it has a bad effect of like sort of removing your ability to interact with people because we do so much celebration over food. You think of any event, office parties, Christmases, family gatherings, they're celebrated with food. And, if you change your diet to such an extreme extent to disallow yourself from enjoying a slice of birthday cake every once in a while, or a fruit salad, or you name it, vegetable tray. I guess that would still be okay because it's very low calorie, but couldn't probably have the dip. um, you know, uh, it's negative like for social reasons, and there's no good evidence that there's a huge upside for your physical health. There's a lot of ways to achieve a healthy lifestyle and weight loss without cutting out carbohydrates. They're good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of brings me to my third point is, it's important to just check yourself. I mean, check yourself and make sure that you know what your needs are. Know what your protein needs are instead of just kind of guessing. Because if you have the information, it's easier to know how to utilize your diet. And we have a speaker request. And to get those needs in. And yes, I would love for Chris to come and talk. Yes. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, good afternoon from San Francisco. I'm enjoying this while I'm doing the dishes.
Oh,
Very
hey.
cool.
Quick question, preface with a fast comment. So I need to lose about 200 pounds, seriously, not joking. And I'm learning over the years that there's certain things I need to relearn. Thankfully, I haven't had any soda in about 15 years. That's totally gone. Where I used to drink just about only soda for my liquid. So that's gone for 15 years. I haven't had any fast food for 3 years. Haven't been to a fast food restaurant in 3 years. And I'm attempting to stop eating at 6 o'clock at night and then make the better choices in the food categories. So, speaking along those lines, how much of the battle, if you will, is mental? Just learning the new habits. I'm fortunate because I like everything. Some people don't like vegetables and there's a problem. Some people don't like fish and there's a problem. But I like everything. So, can you speak for just a few moments about learning the new habits or getting a new mindset? And thank you. I'll go back to the audience. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Were you talking?
I just thanked him for speaking. I think that's a
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
I know you're going to knock this out of the park, so I'm just going to listen and enjoy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you know what? It's just so wonderful to hear all of the changes that you have made. I am 100% an all foods fit dietitian. So I know that it's mental, but I think that, you have to be real. And I guess my question to you, if you want to come back up, is what part of it are you mentally struggling with?
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much. I had to dry my hands. So, the part mentally that I'm still battling is okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to just say it. I guess I love carbs. I like
Mhm.
cheeses. I like breads. I like pastas. On and on and on. So that's like my next battlefield, if you will. Like I said, the fast food's gone. The soda's gone. Eating after 6 is 90% gone. Portion sizes is about 70% under control. But those carbs, oh my gosh, it's that go-to stress food. So, what advice can you give me on that? Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, you have to have carbs. I mean, carbs are essential again to your diet. So for you, it's going to be really just kind of keeping the carbohydrates in check. So knowing how many carbs you need for your meals and your snacks and just keeping to your budget, so to speak, and not denying yourself those carbs. So if you have cheese, which cheese is my favorite. Cheese is the food of the gods, in my opinion. So if you like cheese and if you like bread, there are ways to fit those foods in. So at least you're getting a taste, but you're not over consuming them, because I think it would be easier to cut out soda and fast food if you've done that, you've been successful. But if you start cutting out everything, um, that could lead to bigger problems, potentially even like disordered eating. So that would be my recommendation is, even meet with a dietitian, to be honest with you, and get a plan made, because you don't want to go down the super restrictive route. You just want to be able to know what your numbers are, know exactly how many carbs you need per meal, how many grams of protein, how much fat you need to make sure that you're meeting your goals. And that should help with the weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, bread often gets a bad rap, but I don't believe bread is a bad food at all. It's all about portion control, and yeah, I'd say a higher fiber bread would probably be a good option if you can find one that tastes great. And that's really, to me, the key is enjoy the process. Set up the process so essentially you're living a life where you're enjoying your meals, you're enjoying what you're doing. It's not a battle or a struggle or something you have to really like grit your teeth to do. Um, and also with bread, I remember very vividly. It's an older study. I think it's from like the 1970s and 1980s, but they actually found bread was a very helpful weight loss food because they had subjects consume bread, and it's often not the bread is oftentimes we like top it with like extra, like peanut butter and jelly and things like that that give it even more calories. But having people whatever they ate, whatever they wanted to, but they had to consume 12 slices of bread a day, which is quite a bit. And when they did that, they actually lost weight because the bread had enough fiber and was had enough bulk to it. Essentially, it displaced them from eating other things that would make them more fattening. So yeah, bread doesn't need a bad rap that it often gets, in my opinion.
Yeah, I enjoy that for sure. And honestly, they make a whole grain white bread. If you're a fan of the white bread, because I know that has always been kind of like a tough subject with a lot of the clients that I've worked with, especially, you know, in when I was in clinical nutrition in the hospitals. That was always like a number one question when I go in to do like diabetes education or anything like that is I can't give up my white bread. And I'm like, well, you don't have to. Let me tell you about this whole grain white bread. And honestly, I ate it for a really long time. It was so good. It's by Sarah Lee, because it just has that extra fiber in it and so good. So that might be something to look into
The texture is
too.
such you don't notice it, I think, and that's my personal fave is Papa Pita because I love pita. And Papa Pita, it has 4 grams of fiber per serving. For one of the pitas, it's but the texture is delightful. Often high fiber breads are a bit off putting, in my opinion, where you really have to like force yourself to finish one. But I think it's delightful. So.
Yeah, Chris likes Dave's 21 whole grain bread. Nice. That
Okay.
is good. That is good stuff too. Yeah.
But yeah, thank
For anybody who does have kind of some GI issues, sourdough is usually a little less hurtful on the GI tract too. So that's that's always a good one.
Yeah, that's a
But
win-win.
yeah,
Me too, because I like the taste.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, we're pro carb over here, and we'll definitely talk about carbs. Next week is kind of fun. We are having a neurologist come on to go through wine, cheese, and chocolate and talk about why those affect the body, um, in a very unpleasant way with GERD. So that should be interesting. It's a tasting, if you will. So that'll be fun. And I hope you all can join us for that. But does anybody have any questions for Dr. Alex Koch or myself before we wrap it up?
I see Chris has his thumbs up icon, but I don't know if that was for his other question already. Let's invite him up.
Chris, did you have a comment for us?
No, I didn't actually.
Was it just the Daves?
That was the Dave's. Plus, also, I shared this out with my followers, and I wanted to say thank you so much for this great information. It really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. You make it so much more fun to have a little interaction.
Oh, by the way, homemade applesauce is my latest fun thing to do with a little cinnamon and a tiny drizzle, like a half a teaspoon of drizzle of honey for an entire batch.
Sounds good.
100%. You're inspiring me. That's going to be so nice. It's going to be cold this weekend, so that's actually a really good idea.
So what kind of apples do you use?
Well, amazingly, I use whatever I have. And for some reason, I've been under what I call an apple anointing because it's weird. In San Francisco, we get these food deliveries. I'm over 65. I'm 65. So we get these food deliveries and they just bring them to you and they say, here, take it, use it. So it's usually got apples in there. And then there's neighbors across the street from me here in San Francisco. You can't tell because the houses are jammed together here, but behind their house, one Chinese lady speaks like no English. She comes over to my door and hands me a bag of apples from her backyard tree. And yeah, I learned from an interpreter. She's got plenty of apples and they give me like 35 pounds of apples.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're like, I don't even know what they are. They're huge. They're like a cross between sweet and tart. And they're just absolutely fabulous. So to answer your question, I use whatever I've been given.
That's great, though. What a fun arrangement. I had no idea San Francisco was a good apple growing country. I've only visited there for conferences. It's a great city to visit. Love the sights. Chinatown, Alcatraz. Did the whole we did the wharf that the sea lions took over. Got to see that. But it was,
sorry.
Yes, exactly. That's quite a good impersonation.
No, it's amazing because the city also provides plots, little growing plots for free if you maintain it. So you're going down the street and there's a fenced off half an acre area and they're all over the city. They're gardens, they're city gardens, but in there individuals grow whatever they want.
I love that.
So that's kind of a cool program.
That's amazing.
Yeah, my daughter successfully grew some cherry tomatoes this past growing season. And now she's got flowers and new tomatoes getting ready for this coming spring. And there's a plethora of plants. People grow them in their front yards. They put them in pots on the sidewalks. And it's just fun to go around the city and see the diversity of food.
Oh, definitely. That sounds great.
That is so cool. Like I need to see that because I wish that more cities had that, urban gardens and community gardens and there were quite a few schools that were starting, school gardens. And it's just so important to know how food grows and where your food comes from. And I love that so much. I would love to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I think also, there's probably some benefits to carbon, capture with all that plant growth. So that's a win-win.
Definitely. Well, cool. Hey, well, thank you all for joining us today and, appreciate the conversation, Chris. And, hope everybody learned some stuff about protein and, just have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Bye.